She's going to go on trying next time.
Yeah, except for two of her brothers.
There's lights here.
I never noticed those. That's something new.
Okay.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling very well.
That is not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
My, you're smart.
I'm always smart. Aren't I, Mr. Worthy?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. Well, it would leave no room for development. And I need to develop in many directions. I'm sorry for a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Hareberry. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. Now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn? Thank you, Mamma. I am quite comfortable where I am.
Lady, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them especially for Aunt Augusta. There were no cucumbers at the market today, sir. I went down twice. No cucumbers? No, sir. Not even for ready money. Thank you, Lane. That will do. I'm terribly sorry, Aunt Augusta, but there weren't any cucumbers at the market this morning. Not even for ready money.
Well, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had crumpets with the Lady Hareberry, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair is turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I've got quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
It is a terrible disappointment, but I'm afraid I won't be able to dine with you tonight, Aunt Augusta.
I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your poor uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
I have just received a telegram to say that my poor friend, Mr. Bunbury, is ill again. The doctors think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor invalid Bunbury.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he's going to live or die. This shilly-shallying around the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy for invalids. I consider it morbid. Health is harmony. Health is the primary duty in life. Illness should not be encouraged at all. I keep trying to tell that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to pay much attention as far as any improvements in his ailments goes. I would be much obliged if you were to ask Mr. Bunbury for me to be so kind as to not have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one would want something that encourages conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said everything they're going to say, which in most cases probably isn't much.
I will speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is conscious. But I think I can guarantee you by Saturday he will be well. Now your music presents somewhat of a difficulty. You see, if someone plays good music, nobody listens. And if someone plays bad music, nobody talks. If you will kindly come with me into the other room, I will be happy to go over it with you.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. Fresh songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they're improper and look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German seems a thoroughly respectable language, and I believe it is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Yes, Mama.
Charming weather we have.
Oh, pray, doctor, it is most indecisive.
Mama, I must beg you to retire.
No,
Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
finished what, may I ask?
Mr. Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Pardon me? You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit him, will be the ones to inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a girl as a surprise, as pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a match that she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions I'd like to put to you, Mr. Worthing. Gwendolyn, the carriage! You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing. Tell you that you are not on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm pleased to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove to be a serious threat to the upper classes and would probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
In investments, chiefly.
Well, that's satisfactory. What between the duties expected from one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased either to be a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
Well, I do own a home in the country, with some land attached to it, of course. About 1,500 acres. But I don't rely on that for my main income. Indeed, now that I think about it, I believe the poachers are the only ones who make anything of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that is a matter that can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn can hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a home on Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Blossom. I can get it back any moment I want, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Blossom. I don't know her.
She doesn't get around very much. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays there's no respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I knew there was something. However, that can be easily altered.
The fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume.
Well, I'm afraid I don't really have any. I'm a liberal unionist.
No, they count as Tories. They dine with us or come in the evening at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I'm afraid I've lost both my parents.
Both! To lose one, Mr. Worthy, may be a misfortune, but to lose two looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that they had lost me. I was found.
Found?
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, a gentleman of a kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he had a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in the Sussex, a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman who had the first-class ticket to the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes. A somewhat large, brown, leather handbag with a handle to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom of the Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the writing line.
The lie is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it has handles or not, seems to me to display contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life. That remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station may serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, I asked what you would advise me to do. I need hardly tell you that I would do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relation as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't know how I could possibly do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. Really, I think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me? Sir! What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I, Lord Bracknell, would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning, Lady Bracknell. Quit playing that ghastly tune, Algie! How idiotic you are!
I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, dear Dr. Choswell. I have not said anything about having a headache.
Dear Miss Prism, I know that. I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not my German lesson that the rector walked in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. One for the bees. Mr. Worthing, I assume, is not
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is pleasure, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Agaria and her pupil any longer.
Garia, my
Letitia, Doctor.
Classical allusion, merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, that I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after ball, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. We might go as far as the schools and back?
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will complete your political economy in my absence. Now the chapter on the fall of the review may omit, because it is a bit too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side. Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German. Much alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope, I can understand, but a womanthrope? Never.
Believe me, Miss Prism, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
Well, that is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up until the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear Doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally as attractive when married?
Well, no married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I have been told not even to her.
That depends entirely on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from the fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
This indeed is a surprise. We did not look for you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected.
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma. Come here. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young and physical decay in the old. Apprise, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I'm glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course, you must understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. Now as regards Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Bunbury? No, he's not here right now. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury's dead.
Dead? When did he die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
He was exploded.
Exploded? Was he a victim of a revolutionary outrage? No. He is well punished for his morbidity.
Found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could no longer live. That is what I mean. Bunbury is dead.
Ask Mr. Worthing, who is the young person whose hand my nephew is now holding in what seems to be an unnecessary manner?
That young person is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
Well, I do not know if there's anything particularly exciting in the air in this particular part of
granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, of 149 Belgrave Square, Dorking, Surrey, and the Manor House of Bolton, Herefordshire.
Why, this is not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspires confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They're open for your inspection.
I've known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby and Markby, a firm with the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I'm told one of the Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
I also have, you will be happy to note, records of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, confirmation, registration, vaccination, and the measles, both the English and the German varieties.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Come along, Gwendolyn. It's time for our departure. We've not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I'd better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, only £130,000 in the funds. And that is all. Good day, Lady Bracknell. So nice to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000 in funds? Miss Cardew seems to be the most attractive young girl now that I look at her. Few girls have any really solid qualities. Qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of services. Come here, dear. Pretty child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks almost as nature may have left it. However, that can soon be changed. A thoroughly experienced French maid can produce a really marvelous result in a brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband didn't even know her.
And after 6 months, nobody did.
Just as I had suspected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weaknesses of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. It's worn very high just at present. After all,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
I don't care about social possibilities. I think Cecily is the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Of course, you must know, dear, that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no little fortune of any kind. But I did not dream for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
Cecily, you may kiss me. You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favor of long engagements. It gives people the opportunity to find out one another's character before marriage. Which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting, Lady Bracknell, but as Miss Cardew's guardian, I must give my consent before she is allowed to marry. That consent I decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? My nephew Algernon is an extremely, I might almost say ostentatiously, eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me to speak so frankly about your own nephew, Lady Bracknell, but I'm afraid to say I have found him to be quite untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I'm afraid there can be no possible doubt about the matter. Earlier this afternoon, he obtained admission to my house under a false pretense. Using the false identity of my brother Ernest, he drank, I have just been told by my butler, a bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89, a wine which I have been specially reserving for myself. Continuing his deception, he managed to alienate the affections of my only ward. And what makes it all worse is that though he knows very well that I have no brother, that I have never had a brother, that I certainly do not intend on ever having a brother at any time in the future.
After careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
Well, that is very kind of you, Lady Bracknell, but I still refuse to give my consent.
Come here, dear. How old are you?
18, but I always admit to 20 whenever I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. A woman should never be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 dinner parties. Well, it would not be before long till you are of age and you're free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, of any importance.
I beg your pardon again, Lady Bracknell.